I want you to understand what kind of woman my wife is before I tell you what her own son did to her. She's not the kind of person who complains. 40 years I've known her, and I can count on one hand the times she raised her voice. She gives quietly, gives until there's nothing left, and then somehow finds more. She learned to cook from her mother, who learned from hers. And there's something almost sacred in the way she moves around a kitchen. She doesn't follow recipes anymore. She just knows. Her name is Patricia, but I've called her Pat since the night we met at a dance in Barrie, Ontario, when she was 22 and I was 25, and neither of us knew what we were getting into. We've been married 37 years. We raised 2 kids in the same house where we still live, a 4-bedroom place outside of Kingston, with a backyard that backs onto a thin stretch of woods. We've had good years and hard ones. We buried both our parents, survived a recession that nearly took the business, watched our kids grow up into people we mostly recognize. And I want you to understand all of that before I tell you about last Thanksgiving. Our son Brendan married a woman named Courtney about 4 years ago. The wedding was nice. We paid for a good chunk of it, which we did without being asked, because that's who we are. Courtney came from a family in Mississauga. Her parents were pleasant enough, the kind of people who smile a lot and don't say much. She was polished and organized, the type who color codes her Google Calendar and sends agenda emails before every family dinner. Brendan clearly loved her. That was enough for us at first. The first few years were fine. We had them for Christmas dinner at our place. Pat cooked everything from scratch. Turkey, stuffing, roasted root vegetables, butter tarts, the whole spread, and we were glad to do it. We liked having the house full again. Courtney would arrive with a bottle of wine and spend most of the evening on her phone, but we didn't say anything. We told ourselves she was just an introvert. We told ourselves she was adjusting to being part of a new family. Then things started shifting in small ways that were hard to name. The first time Courtney suggested that Pat might want to try making the stuffing a bit differently. Pat just smiled and said she'd think about it. The second time, Courtney brought a printed article about modern holiday cooking trends and left it on the kitchen counter. Pat found it there after they left and showed it to me without saying a word, just held it up. I told her to throw it out and she did, but I remember the look on her face. That same year, Courtney started hosting Thanksgiving at their condo in Ottawa. We made the 4-hour drive, brought 2 dishes Pat had made the day before, and arrived to find that Courtney had organized the whole event around what she called a curated menu. Every dish was assigned. Pat's contributions were moved to a side table, not the main spread, because they didn't, quote, fit the color palette of the table. I watched Pat absorb that without flinching. I should have said something right then. I didn't. Over the next 2 years, without anyone really deciding it, Pat became the default kitchen support system for every family gathering Courtney organized. She was asked to bring dishes, to help prep, to pop by early to help with setup. Courtney would write out what she wanted with the precision of a project manager. Pat always said yes. I always went along with it, and here's the thing I've thought about many times since. People don't start by asking for too much. They start by asking for a little, then a little more. And each time you say yes, you make the next ask feel reasonable. You do it because you love your son. You do it because you want to keep the peace. You do it because somewhere along the way, you started believing that being a good parent meant being available for whatever was needed, no matter what it cost you. That's what we told ourselves. Right up until last October. Thanksgiving in Canada falls on the second Monday of October, which meant last year it was the 14th. Brendan called me on a Tuesday, about 3 weeks out, which I remember because I was watching the Leafs game and had to turn down the volume to hear him properly. He said Courtney was planning a big Thanksgiving this year. They'd moved into a new house in Canada, larger place, and she wanted to do a proper dinner. 14 people. Some of her work colleagues, her sister's family, some friends of theirs I'd never met. Sounds good, I said. We'll bring something. There was a pause. Actually, Mom's cooking is kind of the plan. I didn't say anything right away. I assumed he meant Pat would bring a couple of dishes, same as always. Said we'd figure out the details and we hung up. 2 days later, Pat got a text from Courtney. She showed it to me that evening at the kitchen table. I read it twice. It was a list. 14 items. Turkey, 18 to 20 pounds, fresh not frozen, stuffing, mashed potatoes, roasted sweet potatoes, green bean casserole, glazed carrots, cranberry sauce from scratch, dinner rolls, gravy, a Caesar salad, a fall harvest salad with maple apple vinaigrette, a pecan pie, a pumpkin pie. and something Courtney called an apple galette that neither of us had ever made. 14 dishes, for 14 people, to be ready by 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and at the bottom, would you be able to arrive early? Maybe around 8 to start. I want everything fresh, so day of prep would be ideal. I can clear some counter space for you. 8 in the morning, in Courtney's kitchen. To cook for 7 hours, alone. I put the phone down and looked at my wife. She was looking at the table. You're not doing this, I said. She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I know. I want to be honest with you about what happened next, because it matters. We didn't argue about it. We didn't call Brendan and yell at him. We didn't send Courtney a long message explaining why this was unreasonable. We sat at the kitchen table for maybe 20 minutes, not saying much. Pat got up and made tea. She set a mug in front of me and sat back down. I said, What do you want to do? She wrapped both hands around her mug. I've been thinking about something. She had brought it up in passing a few months earlier. Nothing firm, just an idea. Her closest friend from nursing school, a woman she'd kept in touch with for 30 years, had retired to Prince Edward Island with her husband. They had a farmhouse outside of Charlottetown, a place with a big kitchen and a view of the inlet. Her friend had mentioned more than once that we should come for a long weekend sometime. Really come, not just talk about it. Pat had thought about it and quietly let it go, the way she quietly let go of a lot of things for herself. Now she looked at me and said, I want to go to PEI for Thanksgiving weekend. Yes. I didn't hesitate. I'm in. We booked the flights the next morning, Porter Airlines Kingston to Charlottetown, with a connection in Toronto. I made the reservation before I'd finished my first coffee. Pat called her friend, who picked up on the second ring, and immediately started talking about what she'd cook for us. We didn't call Brendan first. I've thought about whether we should have, and I still don't think so. He knew Thanksgiving was in 3 weeks. He knew his wife had sent that text. If he'd had any concern about whether it was a reasonable thing to ask, he would have picked up the phone himself. He didn't. We left on the Friday before Thanksgiving. I asked our neighbor, a retired school teacher we've known for 15 years, if she'd water the plants and collect the flyers. We packed light, 2 carry-ons, which felt almost strange, like we were forgetting something, like we always do when we travel without worrying about anyone else's schedule. Before we left, I wrote a note. I kept it short. I put it on the kitchen table in our house. Not that it made any logistical sense to anyone who might wonder about it later. But I wanted something physical, something that existed, a record that we had made a decision together. The note said we'd gone away for the weekend and we'd be back Tuesday, that we hoped everyone had a good Thanksgiving, that there was food in the freezer if Brendan needed it. We drove to the airport in the dark, the highway quiet, the city still sleeping. I remember Pat looking out the passenger window at the fields going by, and she looked lighter than she had in months. I didn't say anything about it, I just noticed. The flight was fine. Charlottetown was cold and clear, that particular October light that makes everything look like it's been painted. Her friend and her husband met us at the airport with a thermos of coffee and a lot of warmth, and by the time we got to the farmhouse, I had almost forgotten entirely about the text, about the list, about all of it. Almost. I need to tell you about Thanksgiving Monday, because that's where the story really lives. We had dinner early, around 1 o'clock, sitting around a big pine table in a farmhouse kitchen, the kind of table that's been in someone's family long enough to have character. There were 4 of us, and it was exactly the right number. Pat's friend had made a simple turkey breast, roasted vegetables, good bread, a rhubarb crumble for dessert, nothing complicated. Everything tasted like someone had actually thought about what you'd want to eat on a cold October afternoon. We talked for a long time, the kind of talking you do when nobody is performing for anyone, when you're not managing a conversation to avoid topics, when you can just say what you actually think. We talked about getting older, about the kids, about the years that went faster than you expected, and the years that dragged. We talked about what it means to finally stop waiting for permission to take care of yourself. Pat laughed more that afternoon than she had in a long time. Real laughing, not the polite kind. I watched her and felt something settle in my chest. We were still at the table, cups of tea in front of us, the afternoon going quiet outside, when her phone buzzed. She looked at it. Then she turned it face down on the table without saying a word. Raised an eyebrow. Brendan, she said. A minute later, my phone rang. I looked at the screen. Brendan, I let it ring. He called twice more over the next 20 minutes. Then a text came in. I read it at the table without picking up the phone. Dad, where are you guys? Courtney is pretty stressed. She didn't realize you weren't coming. Can you call me? I showed it to Pat. She read it and put the phone back down. Her friend refilled our tea. I waited until the following morning to call him back. He picked up on the first ring, and his voice had that particular tightness I recognized from when he was 17 and had done something he knew was wrong but didn't want to admit to yet. Where were you guys? Pi, I said. We told you we were going away. You didn't tell us. No, I said. We didn't. We were under the impression you knew your mother wasn't available. Silence. Courtney was really counting on. I know what Courtney was counting on, I said. I read the list. He was quiet for a moment. Then, she could have just said she wasn't able to do it. And here is where I had to be careful, because I could feel the old pull, the pull to smooth it over, to say something that would make the moment smaller, to take the path of least resistance. 37 years of marriage teaches you a few things, and one of them is the cost of that particular shortcut, I said. You're right, she should have, and so should I. We should have said something a long time ago. But I need you to understand something, son. Your mother is not a caterer. She's not staff. When your wife sends her a 14-item menu to prepare alone for a party of 14 people, that's not a request. That's an assumption. And we're done letting that assumption go unaddressed. Brendan didn't say anything for a long time. Then he said, Courtney ended up ordering Swiss chalet. I almost laughed. I genuinely almost did. I kept it together, but just barely. Good, I said. I hope it was decent. We flew home Tuesday morning. The drive from the airport was quiet, the good kind. The maples along the highway were at full color. That particular week in Ontario when everything looks like it's on fire right before the cold comes in and ends it. Pat looked out the window most of the way home. When we pulled into the driveway, she sat for a moment without getting out. I turned off the engine and waited. I should have said no a long time ago, she said. Yeah, I said. Me too. She nodded. Then she got out of the car and went inside, and I sat there for another minute alone in the quiet driveway, watching the light move through the trees. We haven't been back to Ottawa since. Brendan calls more now, actually. Not texting through intermediaries, not routing messages through Courtney's agenda. He calls on Sunday evenings, same as he used to when he first moved away, and the conversations are easier than they've been in years. Courtney sent a message about 3 weeks after Thanksgiving. Short, a bit stiff. Something about hoping we had a good trip, and maybe we could plan ahead better next year. Pat read it, thought about it for a full day, and wrote back 2 sentences. She said she'd had a wonderful Thanksgiving, and that she was open to getting together sometime in the new year. She didn't apologize. She didn't explain. She didn't leave the door open any wider than she wanted it. I was proud of her for that. I still am. There's a thing I've learned about respect. Not the performance of it, not the word itself, but the actual thing. It doesn't arrive because you asked for it. It doesn't arrive because you deserve it. It arrives when you stop accepting less than it, consistently and without drama, until the people around you have no choice but to recalibrate. It took us too long. I won't pretend otherwise. We spent years saying yes when we should have said not a chance. We mistook availability for generosity and silence for kindness. We thought we were keeping the peace when we were actually teaching our son's household that we didn't have one. But here's what I know now. Sitting in the same kitchen, where Pat makes her coffee every morning, where the light comes in sideways through the window, above the sink in October, where 37 years of ordinary life have accumulated in the kind of quiet that feels like something you built. We are not available by default. We are available when we choose to be, on terms that don't cost us our dignity. And next Thanksgiving, we're thinking about going back to PEI.